What happens when an entire galactic alliance dismisses a single human as irrelevant? When Admiral Zara Chen steps onto the bridge of humanity's first interstellar vessel, every alien species in the known galaxy sees nothing more than a primitive upstart from a backwater world. They've calculated human capabilities, measured their technology, and filed them under negligible threat. But there's one thing the galaxy's greatest minds failed to account for. They've never seen what happens when you back a human into a corner. Some mistakes echo across star systems, others reshape civilizations. This one will do both. The massive viewing chamber of the Galactic Council station hummed with the collective breathing of a dozen different species. Admiral Zara Chen stood at the center of the circular room, her crisp blue uniform, a stark contrast to the elaborate robes, biomechanical suits, and crystalline forms surrounding her. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the room focused on the small human female who had just requested membership in the most powerful alliance in known space. Council Speaker Vorthak, a towering reptilian creature whose scales shimmered with embedded technology, leaned forward on his ceremonial perch. His voice rumbled through translation devices mounted throughout the chamber. So, the humans of Earth finally venture beyond their single star system. Tell us, Admiral Chen, what makes your species worthy of consideration? Zara kept her expression neutral, despite the condescending tone. She had expected this reception. Humanity's first contact with the galactic community had occurred only 18 months ago, when a Zenthari exploration vessel discovered Earth during a routine mineral survey. The subsequent cultural exchange had revealed humanity's relatively primitive technology and recent emergence from their home planet. To species that had been traveling between stars for millennia, humans appeared to be nothing more than clever animals who had just learned to make fire. Honorable Speaker, Zara replied, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. We offer what every member species brings to the Council: unique perspectives, resources, and capabilities that strengthen the alliance. A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the assembled delegates. It came from Ambassador Quellen of the Hegemony, whose people had perfected faster-than-light travel when humans were still discovering agriculture. His translucent form pulsed with amusement. Unique capabilities? Your species has barely mastered fusion power. Your fastest vessels require months to travel distances we cover in hours. What possible contribution could you make? Zara had studied each of the Council's member species extensively during the journey to the station. The Hegemony controlled 47 star systems and possessed technology that seemed almost magical to human scientists. Their ships could fold space-time, their computers operated on quantum consciousness principles, and their weapons could destabilize entire planets. Next to them sat representatives of the collective, a hive-mind species that operated as one vast intelligence across thousands of worlds. The Zenthari had perfected genetic engineering to the point where they could adapt to any environment within hours. The mechanical Nexus beings had transcended biological limitations entirely, existing as pure information in bodies of programmable matter. Our technology may be primitive by your standards, Zara acknowledged, but we've achieved something remarkable in our brief time among the stars. In the 18 months since first contact, we've reverse-engineered Zenthari propulsion systems, developed our own translation protocols, and successfully navigated to this station using hybrid technology that combines our engineering with your innovations. Vorthak's massive head tilted slightly. Impressive adaptation speed, perhaps, but hardly unique. The Yalani incorporated similar technologies within their first year of contact. What else? We offer perspective, Zara said. Every species in this council has evolved along similar technological and social paths. You've all developed advanced technologies, explored the galaxy, and established vast civilizations. But humanity has taken a different route. This caught the attention of Ambassador Nexus Prime, whose form shifted from a humanoid shape to something resembling a geometric crystal. Elaborate? Zara touched a control on her wrist device, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed Earth's history compressed into a flowing timeline of images and data. While your species were perfecting interstellar travel, humans were perfecting something else: conflict resolution under impossible circumstances. Our entire development has been shaped by resource scarcity, environmental challenges, and the constant need to find solutions with limited options. The display showed scenes of human history, ancient civilizations building monuments that still stood thousands of years later, explorers crossing dangerous oceans in primitive vessels, scientists making breakthrough discoveries in basement laboratories, and engineers solving complex problems with improvised materials. We call it making do, Zara continued. When faced with insufficient resources, humans don't just adapt, we innovate. We find ways to exceed theoretical limitations using available materials and unconventional thinking. Ambassador Quellen's form pulsed with skepticism. Every species faces challenges during development. This is hardly unique. But not every species faces them the way we do, Zara replied. When the Zenthari needed faster ships, they spent centuries perfecting antimatter containment. When humans needed to travel faster, we built ships powered by controlled nuclear explosions and rode the shockwaves. When the hegemony required more computational power, you developed quantum consciousness networks. When humans needed better computers, we taught sand to think. The chamber fell silent as the delegates processed this statement. Council records showed that human computer technology was indeed based on silicon semiconductors, literally programmed sand. But the poetic way of describing it highlighted something the Council had missed. Nexus Prime's form rippled with interest. Your species approaches problems from fundamentally different angles. Exactly, Zara said. We don't just solve problems, we redefine them. When something is impossible, we change what impossible means. Vorthak leaned back, his scales clicking against his perch. These are interesting philosophical points, Admiral, but the Council requires more concrete benefits. What specific advantages would humanity bring to the Alliance? Zara had been waiting for this question. She touched another control, and the holographic display changed to show detailed schematics of human spacecraft. Our ships may be slower than yours, but they're also more versatile. They can operate in environments that would destroy more advanced vessels because they're designed to function when everything goes wrong. The schematics highlighted redundant systems, modular components, and adaptive technologies that could reconfigure themselves based on changing conditions. Unlike the elegant, specialized designs favored by other species, human ships looked like they had been built by someone who expected them to be shot at, crashed, and repaired with spare parts from different manufacturers. Furthermore, Zara continued, our military doctrine emphasizes adaptability over superiority. We don't try to build the most powerful weapons. We build weapons that can be modified for any situation. Ambassador Kethra of the Warrior Caste snorted dismissively. Her people had conquered 17 systems through sheer military might, and her bio-enhanced form was designed for combat. Your primitive weapons would be useless against any serious military force. Would they? Zara asked quietly. Tell me, Ambassador Kethra, how would your forces respond to an enemy that didn't try to match your strength? They would be crushed, Kethra replied with confidence. Superior firepower always prevails. But what if the enemy didn't engage your firepower directly? What if they found ways to turn your own strength against you? What if they made you fight on terms you hadn't prepared for? The warrior's enhanced reflexes tensed slightly. Elaborate. Human military history is full of smaller forces defeating larger ones through unconventional tactics. We have extensive experience fighting enemies with superior resources, technology, and numbers. We've learned to win by changing the rules of engagement. The holographic display showed historical battles where outnumbered human forces had achieved victory through surprise, deception, environmental advantages, and psychological warfare. Each example demonstrated humans finding ways to neutralize their opponent's advantages while maximizing their own strengths. This is all theoretical, interjected Ambassador Silex of the Scientific Consortium. His crystalline form refracted the chamber's light into complex patterns. You speak of human adaptability and unconventional thinking, but these claims remain unproven on a galactic scale. Zara smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Actually, Ambassador, we've already proven it. The statement sent a ripple of confusion through the assembled delegates. Vorthak's massive form straightened on his perch. Explain. The journey to this station required passage through Nexus territory, hegemony space, and 3 neutral zones controlled by various species. Our single ship, with its primitive technology and inexperienced crew, successfully navigated political boundaries, customs inspections, and security protocols established by civilizations thousands of years older than ours. The truth of this statement was undeniable. Every delegate had received reports of the human ship's approach, and all had noted the impressive diplomatic and technical skill required for such a journey. We studied each species' communication protocols, learned your customs, adapted our behavior to meet your expectations, and solved problems we'd never encountered before. We did this while operating technology we'd invented months earlier, following star charts we'd never seen, and communicating in languages we'd just learned. Nexus Prime's form shifted into a more compact configuration, the mechanical equivalent of leaning forward with interest. The computational requirements for such rapid adaptation are considerable. Which brings us to perhaps humanity's greatest strength, Zara continued. We don't just adapt quickly, we adapt permanently. Every challenge we overcome becomes part of our collective knowledge. Every problem we solve teaches us to solve similar problems better. We don't just learn from experience, we learn how to learn. The holographic display showed human educational systems, research methodologies, and knowledge-sharing networks. Unlike species that relied on genetic memory, hive consciousness, or quantum data storage, humans had developed systems for rapidly disseminating new information across their entire population. Within one generation, discoveries made by individual humans become common knowledge. Within 2 generations, those discoveries become the foundation for new innovations. Our technological development may have started slowly, but it accelerates exponentially. Ambassador Quellen's translucent form pulsed thoughtfully. An interesting trait, but hardly sufficient for council membership. The benefits you describe are long-term and speculative. Are they? Zara asked. In the 18 months since first contact, how many of your species have achieved new technological breakthroughs by studying human methods? This question landed like a physical blow in the chamber. Every delegate knew that their respective species' research divisions had indeed been studying human technology, not because it was advanced, but because it was different. Human approaches to engineering, computation, and problem-solving had already sparked innovations across multiple species. The Xanthari have improved their ship designs by incorporating human redundancy concepts, Zara continued. The Hegemony's quantum processors now use human-inspired error correction algorithms. The Nexus Collective has adopted human modular manufacturing techniques. In less than 2 years, our primitive thinking has enhanced the technology of civilizations millennia older than ours. Vorthak's scales rippled in what might have been approval or concern. You suggest that human membership would accelerate technological development across the Council. I suggest that human membership would prevent technological stagnation, Zara replied. Every species in this chamber has achieved remarkable things, but you've also reached a plateau. Your technologies are perfected, your societies are stable, your challenges are manageable. But perfection can become a trap. The statement sparked murmurs of discussion throughout the chamber. Several delegates exchanged communications through their respective species' private channels. When challenges become routine, innovation slows, Zara continued. When problems have standard solutions, creative thinking atrophies. Humanity offers the Council something you may not realize you need. Fresh perspectives that see new possibilities in old problems. Ambassador Silex's crystalline form brightened as he processed the implications. You propose that human inexperience could paradoxically benefit more experienced civilizations. Exactly. Sometimes the best solution comes from someone who doesn't know it's supposed to be impossible. The chamber fell silent as the delegates contemplated this statement. For species that had spent millennia perfecting their approaches to various challenges, the idea that primitive newcomers might offer valuable alternatives was both intriguing and unsettling. Vorthak finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority of countless diplomatic decisions. Admiral Chen, your arguments are thought-provoking. However, the Council requires more than philosophical discussions. Can you provide concrete evidence of humanity's potential contributions? Zara had anticipated this request. She touched a final control on her wrist device, and the holographic display changed to show detailed plans for a revolutionary new technology. 3 months ago, human scientists working with Xanthari researchers developed this, a hybrid propulsion system that combines human fusion pulse technology with Xanthari spacefolding principles. The result is a drive system that's 300% more efficient than current Xanthari designs while being significantly more robust and maintainable. The technical specifications filled the air around the delegates, showing power curves, efficiency ratings, and stress tests that exceeded anything in the Council's current technology database. Furthermore, Zara continued, human psychologists working with hegemony consciousness researchers have developed new approaches to interspecies communication that could revolutionize diplomatic relations, and human engineers collaborating with Nexus manufacturing specialists have created adaptive construction systems that could transform how the Council builds everything from space stations to planetary installations. Each revelation sent new ripples of interest through the chamber. The delegates were seeing not just evidence of human potential, but proof that human collaboration with existing Council species produced results that neither could achieve alone. In short, Zara concluded, humanity doesn't just want to join the Council, we want to help the Council reach new heights of achievement. We offer partnership, not just membership. The chamber erupted in discussions as delegates conferred with their home governments, analyzed the presented data, and debated the implications of human membership. Zara stood calmly in the center of the chaos, knowing that she had presented the strongest possible case for her species, but she also knew that the real test was yet to come. The Council's decision would depend not just on what humanity could offer, but on whether the galaxy's most powerful species were ready to accept that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected sources. As the debates continued around her, Zara allowed herself a small smile. Whatever the Council decided, they would never again be able to dismiss humanity as insignificant. The galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humans was a mistake with far-reaching consequences. The first seeds of change had been planted. Now it was time to see how they would grow. 3 standard galactic days had passed since Admiral Chen's presentation to the Council, and the debates showed no signs of resolution. Deep within the station's residential quarters, Zara sat in her assigned diplomatic suite, reviewing intercepted communications that her ship's intelligence officer had managed to decode. The messages painted a complex picture of the Council's internal politics. The Zenthari delegation was surprisingly supportive, their scientific curiosity overriding their natural caution about primitive species. Ambassador Silex had sent several encrypted messages to the home worlds, describing human hybrid technologies as paradigm-shifting innovations. The Nexus Collective remained analytically neutral, processing the implications of human membership through their vast computational networks. But it was the opposition that concerned Zara most. Ambassador Kethra had been mobilizing the military factions within the Council, arguing that humanity's unpredictable nature represented a security risk. Her reports to the warrior-caste leadership painted humans as potentially dangerous wildcards who could destabilize the carefully maintained balance of galactic power. Even more troubling were the communications from the hegemony's shadow networks, which had begun conducting deep intelligence analysis of human history and psychology. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on the diplomatic channel. The holographic projector activated, showing the familiar translucent form of Ambassador Quellen. His usual sardonic amusement had been replaced by something that looked almost like concern. "Admiral Chen," he began without preamble, "I believe we need to discuss certain developments privately." "I'm listening, Ambassador." Quellen's form flickered slightly as he enhanced the encryption on their communication link. "There are forces within the Council that view your species as more than simply primitive newcomers. Some of our intelligence analysts have been studying human history in detail, and they've reached conclusions that concern me." Zara leaned forward in her chair. "What kind of conclusions?" "They believe humans may be fundamentally different from other species in ways that could threaten the existing order. Your presentation 3 days ago, while persuasive, may have revealed more than you intended." The holographic display in Zara's quarters activated, showing classified hegemony intelligence reports. The documents were filled with analysis of human warfare, technological development, and social structures. Red warning indicators highlighted sections dealing with human adaptability, aggression, and what the analysts called exponential learning curves. "They're afraid," Quellen continued. "For the first time in millennia, the Council faces a species that doesn't fit their predictive models. Every other race we've encountered follows similar developmental patterns: gradual technological advancement, stable social structures, predictable responses to challenges. Humans appear to break every rule." Zara studied the intelligence reports with growing unease. The hegemony analysts had identified patterns in human development that even she hadn't fully appreciated. They had tracked the acceleration of human technological progress, noting how innovations in one field consistently triggered breakthroughs in seemingly unrelated areas. They had mapped the speed at which human societies adapted to new circumstances, observing that humans could completely restructure their civilizations within single generations when necessary. What specifically concerns them? Zara asked. Quellen's form pulsed with nervous energy. Everything. Your species' capacity for exponential growth. Your ability to find solutions that bypass established limitations. Your tendency to turn disadvantages into advantages. But most of all, your potential for what they're calling civilization cascade. I'm not familiar with that term. It's a theoretical concept. The idea that a single, innovative species could trigger rapid advancement across multiple civilizations simultaneously. The analysts believe that human collaboration with council species could accelerate technological and social development beyond the ability of existing power structures to maintain stability. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. The council's careful balance of power depended on predictable, gradual change. If human involvement accelerated development across multiple species simultaneously, it could shatter the political and economic systems that had maintained galactic stability for thousands of years. They see us as a threat to their way of life, she said. Worse than that, Quellen replied. They see you as an existential threat to their continued relevance. If human methods can consistently produce breakthrough innovations, if human perspectives can solve problems that have stymied advanced civilizations for centuries, if human adaptability can help other species transcend their current limitations, then the established hierarchy becomes meaningless. A new holographic display materialized, showing power structure analyses of the Council. The hegemony controlled the largest number of systems, but their dominance was based on technological superiority that was beginning to look less absolute. The warrior castes maintained order through military might, but their rigid doctrines were being questioned by species who had seen human tactical innovations. Even the scientific consortium's position as the galaxy's intellectual leaders was threatened by human approaches to research and development. What are they planning to do about it? Zara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. There will be a closed session tomorrow, Quellen said. Several military delegations are proposing what they call containment protocols. They want to limit human expansion, restrict human access to advanced technologies, and prevent human collaboration with other species. And if we refuse? Quellen's form dimmed slightly. The hardliners are discussing more direct solutions. Ambassador Kethra has already requested authorization to deploy warrior-cased forces to monitor human activities for galactic security. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. The galaxy's most powerful military forces were considering humanity to be enough of a threat to warrant armed intervention. The irony was bitter. Humans had come to the Council seeking partnership and acceptance, only to discover that their very nature made them targets for suppression. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because some of us remember what happened the last time the Council tried to contain a species it considered dangerous. The reference sent another wave of unease through Zara. She had studied the history of the Violin incident during her preparation for this mission. The Violin had been a rapidly developing species whose technological innovations had begun to threaten established power structures. The Council had implemented containment protocols, restricting Violin expansion and limiting their access to advanced technologies. The Violin had responded by developing technologies the Council had never seen before, using principles that bypassed established scientific understanding. The resulting conflict had devastated 17 star systems and led to the complete extinction of the Violin species. It remained the Council's greatest shame and most closely guarded secret. You think history could repeat itself, Zara said. I think the parallels are too obvious to ignore. The Vilan were also adaptable, innovative, and capable of exponential development. The Council's response to them created the very threat they were trying to prevent. The communication link flickered as Quellen enhanced the security protocols even further. Admiral, I need you to understand something crucial. The debate tomorrow isn't really about whether to accept humanity into the Council. It's about whether to allow humanity to continue existing as an independent species. The statement hung in the air like a death sentence. Zara had come to the Council believing that the worst possible outcome would be rejection of human membership. She had never imagined that humanity's survival as a free species might be at stake. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "Honestly, I recommend you leave. Take your ship, return to Earth, and advise your government to avoid contact with the Council for at least a century. Give your species time to develop defenses that even we would find challenging, and abandon any hope of galactic cooperation. Better isolation than extinction." Zara stood and began pacing her quarters, her mind racing through possibilities. Retreat was the safest option, but it would also confirm the Council's fears about human unpredictability. More importantly, it would trap humanity in their single-star system, while potentially hostile civilizations developed countermeasures against human innovations. "There has to be another option," she said. "Such as?" "We change the terms of the debate." Quellen's form brightened with curiosity. "Elaborate." "The Council fears human unpredictability because they see it as a threat to stability. But what if we could demonstrate that human unpredictability actually enhances stability by preventing stagnation? The hardliners won't be convinced by philosophical arguments. Then we don't convince them with arguments. We convince them with results." Zara activated her personal communication device and began sending encrypted messages to her ship. Captain Morrison and the rest of her crew had been monitoring Council communications through their own intelligence networks. If her suspicions were correct, they had already begun preparing for the possibility of hostile action. "What are you planning?" Quellen asked. "A demonstration. The Council wants to see evidence of human capabilities. Tomorrow, they're going to get more than they bargained for. Admiral, anything that appears threatening will only confirm their worst fears." "Who said anything about appearing threatening? We're going to appear helpful." Over the next several hours, Zara coordinated with her crew to implement a plan that would have seemed insane by normal diplomatic standards. Captain Morrison and Chief Engineer Rodriguez began reconfiguring their ship's systems for maximum efficiency and capability demonstration. Communications Officer Park established secure links with human researchers back on Earth, while Intelligence Officer Kim continued monitoring Council communications for any signs of military mobilization. The plan was audacious, risky, and completely contrary to established diplomatic protocol. It was also, Zara realized, exactly the kind of unconventional approach that made the Council nervous about humanity in the first place. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Zara received one final communication from Quellen. His translucent form appeared more solid than usual, suggesting he was focusing significant energy on the conversation. "Admiral, I've been thinking about our earlier discussion. There's something else you should know." "What is it?" "The intelligence reports I showed you. They're incomplete. The analysts have been studying human history, but they've been focusing on your wars, your conflicts, your competitive behaviors. They've largely ignored your collaborative achievements." Zara felt a spark of hope. "Meaning?" "They see humans as dangerous competitors, but they haven't fully grasped your potential as partners. The innovations you've achieved through collaboration with Council species aren't just improvements, they're evolutionary leaps that benefit everyone involved. And you think that distinction matters? I think it's the only thing that matters. If tomorrow's debate focuses on human competitiveness, your species will be branded as a threat. But if it focuses on human collaboration, you might still have a chance." After Quellen ended the communication, Zara stood at the viewport of her quarters, looking out at the vast space station that housed representatives of dozens of civilizations. Each species had achieved remarkable things during their development, but they had also become locked into established patterns of thinking and behavior. The humans offered something different, not just new technologies or tactics, but new ways of approaching problems entirely. The question was whether the galaxy's established powers would see that difference as an opportunity or a threat. Tomorrow's debate would determine not just humanity's place in the galactic community, but potentially the future direction of civilization itself. The stakes could not be higher, and the margin for error was non-existent. As she prepared for what might be the most important day in human history, Zara allowed herself one moment of doubt. Was she making the right choice? Was the risk worth the potential reward? But then she thought about the thousands of years of human history that had led to this moment. All the times her species had faced impossible odds and found ways to prevail. Humans had never won through superior strength or advanced technology. They had won by refusing to accept that victory was impossible, by finding solutions that others had never considered, and by turning their disadvantages into strengths. Tomorrow, The galaxy would discover what happened when they underestimated that capacity for transformation. The Council's mistake was about to become catastrophic, not for humanity, but for their own preconceptions about what was possible. The real demonstration was about to begin. The closed session chamber was smaller than the main council hall, but its atmosphere was far more intense. Representatives from the galaxy's most militaristic species occupied reinforced seating designed to accommodate their various physiologies, while holographic displays showed tactical analyses and threat assessments that painted humanity in increasingly darker terms. Admiral Chen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by 2 junior officers from her crew. Across the chamber, Ambassador Kethra and her military advisors had assembled what amounted to a prosecution team, complete with detailed evidence of human aggressive tendencies and unpredictable behaviors. The formal accusation was violation of Section 847 of the Galactic Peace Accords, presenting a clear, present danger to interstellar stability. Council Speaker Vorthak called the session to order with obvious reluctance. As the civilian head of the council, he had limited authority over military matters, but protocol required his presence at any proceedings that could result in sanctions against a potential member species. This tribunal will examine evidence regarding humanity's suitability for council membership, Vorthak announced, his scaled form rigid with diplomatic tension. Ambassador Kethra, present your case. The warrior stood with fluid grace that belied her massive frame. Her bio-enhanced physiology was designed for combat, with reinforced bone structure, enhanced musculature, and sensory organs that could detect threats across multiple spectrums. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. Honorable Council, the evidence is clear. Humanity represents an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. The chamber's display systems activated, showing detailed analyses of human history. No other species has demonstrated such consistent patterns of exponential development, technological adaptation, and strategic unpredictability. The first series of displays showed human technological progress over the past 2 centuries. Unlike other species, whose development followed predictable curves, human advancement showed dramatic acceleration phases that seemed to violate established principles of technological evolution. Observe the timeline, Kethra continued. In the span of less than 200 Earth years, humans progressed from primitive steam power to nuclear fusion, from basic chemistry to genetic engineering, from simple mathematics to quantum computation. This rate of development is not just unusual, it's dangerous. Admiral Chen watched the presentation with careful attention, noting how the military analysts had interpreted human achievements. They had identified genuine patterns, but their focus on threat assessment had led them to draw conclusions that missed crucial context. Furthermore, Kethra said, human behavioral analysis reveals consistent tendencies toward conflict escalation, resource competition, and territorial expansion. Even their entertainment media glorifies warfare, conquest, and technological supremacy over other species. The displays shifted to show excerpts from human science fiction, historical documentaries, and military training materials. Viewed through the lens of alien psychology, human culture appeared aggressively expansionist and inherently violent. The analysts had carefully selected examples that supported their thesis while ignoring contradictory evidence. Most concerning, the warrior continued, is humanity's response to challenges. While other species seek stable, sustainable solutions, humans consistently choose escalation. When faced with limitations, they don't adapt to constraints. They eliminate constraints entirely. This accusation struck closer to the truth than Chen had expected. Human history was indeed filled with examples of breakthrough innovations that had bypassed established limitations, rather than working within them. The challenge was helping the Council understand why this tendency represented an asset rather than a threat. Ambassador Silex of the Scientific Consortium raised a crystalline appendage. Ambassador Kethra, while your analysis identifies genuine patterns, it appears to focus exclusively on potential negative outcomes. Have you considered positive applications of these same tendencies? The risks outweigh any theoretical benefits, Kethra replied curtly. A species that refuses to accept limitations will inevitably come into conflict with others who have learned to work within established boundaries. But those same tendencies have produced the collaborative breakthroughs Admiral Chen described in her initial presentation. Silex countered. Human Zenthari propulsion systems, human hegemony communication protocols, human nexus manufacturing innovations, all represent advances that benefit multiple species. Temporary gains that mask long-term threats, Kethra said dismissively. Today's innovations become tomorrow's weapons when placed in human hands. The debate continued for several hours, with various council members presenting evidence and arguments for different positions. The scientists generally supported human membership, fascinated by the potential for new discoveries. The diplomatic corps remained divided, seeing both opportunities and risks in human integration. But the military representatives grew increasingly convinced that humanity represented an existential threat to galactic order. As the proceedings reached their midpoint, Council Speaker Vorthak called for Admiral Chen's response to the accusations. Chen stood slowly, her mind racing through the presentation she had prepared. The evidence against humanity was more comprehensive than she had expected, and some of the accusations contained uncomfortable grains of truth. But there was one crucial element the Council had missed, and it was time to reveal it. Honorable Council, she began. Ambassador Kethra and her colleagues have presented an analysis that demonstrates remarkable research capabilities and strategic thinking. Their concern for galactic stability is admirable, and their assessment of human capabilities is largely accurate. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. The delegates had expected denial, counter-accusations, or appeals to emotion. They had not expected acknowledgement of the military assessment's validity. However, Chen continued, their analysis contains a critical flaw. They have studied humanity in isolation, examining our species as if we exist in a vacuum. But humans have never existed in isolation. We have always been defined by our relationships with others. The chamber's display systems activated at Chen's command, showing new data that her crew had transmitted from their ship. But instead of showing human achievements, the displays showed something far more revealing, real-time analysis of the Council itself. Over the past 4 days, human observers have been studying this station and its inhabitants. We have analyzed Council decision-making processes, communication patterns, resource allocation systems, and social dynamics. What we found surprised us. The displays showed detailed maps of information flow within the Council, highlighting bottlenecks, inefficiencies, and communication failures that had developed over centuries of established procedures. Human analysis had identified patterns that the Council's own systems had never detected. You have created a stable civilization, but you have also created a stagnant one, Chen said. Your decision-making processes are so complex that simple choices require months of deliberation. Your communication protocols are so formalized that spontaneous collaboration has become nearly impossible. Your resource allocation systems are so bureaucratic that urgent needs often go unmet while surpluses sit unused. The accusations landed like physical blows throughout the chamber. Several delegates began accessing their own databases to verify Chen's analysis, while others initiated private communications with their home governments. But more importantly, Chen continued, you have created a civilization that has forgotten how to take risks. Every major innovation in Council history occurred during periods of crisis or conflict. In peacetime, your development has slowed to a crawl. Ambassador Kethra's bio-enhanced form tensed with barely controlled anger. You dare to criticize civilizations that were thriving when your species was living in caves? I'm not criticizing your achievements, Chen replied calmly. I'm observing that those achievements have created their own limitations. Success can become a trap when it eliminates the challenges that originally drove innovation. The display systems shifted to show comparative analysis of technological development across Council species. The data revealed uncomfortable truths. Most major breakthroughs had occurred hundreds or thousands of years ago, with subsequent progress being primarily incremental improvements on established technologies. Humans represent something you haven't seen in millennia, Chen said. We're a species that's still climbing, still struggling, still facing challenges that require innovative solutions. We haven't yet achieved the kind of stability that breeds complacency, and that makes you dangerous, Kethra interjected. It makes us useful, Chen corrected. The galaxy faces challenges that stable civilizations are ill-equipped to handle. Resource depletion in older star systems, contact with potentially hostile species beyond explored space, technological stagnation in critical fields, social unrest among younger species seeking advancement opportunities. The displays shifted again, showing intelligence reports that made several delegates visibly uncomfortable. Chen's crew had not just been analyzing the Council, they had been analyzing the galaxy itself, identifying threats and challenges that the established powers had been reluctant to acknowledge. The Void Runners have been probing Council territory for the past 50 years, Chen continued, referring to mysterious entities from dark space that periodically attacked isolated systems. Your response has been defensive fortification and improved early warning systems, but you haven't developed new technologies to counter their capabilities because your research institutions are focused on perfecting existing systems rather than developing revolutionary alternatives. Ambassador Nexus Prime's geometric form shifted into a more aggressive configuration. Human intelligence capabilities are more advanced than we were led to believe. Our intelligence capabilities are different, Chen corrected. We don't just gather information. We synthesize it into actionable insights. We look for patterns that others miss because we approach problems from angles that established thinking doesn't consider. Exactly the kind of unpredictability we find threatening, Kethra said. Then let me show you why that unpredictability is exactly what you need. Chen activated a final command on her wrist device, and the chamber's communication systems announced an incoming priority transmission from the human ship. Captain Morrison's image appeared on the main display, his expression serious but controlled. Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from the Kepler Research Station in Sector 7. They're under attack by an unidentified force using technology we've never seen before. Council forces are responding, but they're requesting immediate assistance from any ships in the area. The effect on the chamber was electric. Kepler Research Station was one of the Council's most important scientific installations, home to breakthrough research in quantum manipulation and consciousness transfer. An attack on the facility represented both a strategic threat and a potential catastrophe for galactic scientific development. How far is your ship from the station? Chen asked. 18 hours at maximum speed. Council forces won't arrive for 36 hours. Chen turned to face the assembled delegates. This is what I meant about humans being useful. You have a crisis that requires immediate action, innovative thinking, and the willingness to take calculated risks. Your standard protocols call for waiting for sufficient forces to guarantee success, but by the time those forces arrive, the station may be destroyed, and its research lost forever. Vorthak's scales rippled with agitation. Admiral Chen, you cannot seriously suggest that a single human ship could accomplish what an entire Council fleet cannot. I'm suggesting that a single human ship might try approaches that a Council fleet would never consider. The chamber erupted in debate as delegates argued about appropriate responses to the crisis. Some demanded that the human ship stand down and wait for proper military support. Others insisted that any assistance was better than none. But Chen could see that the real issue was not military protocol. It was the Council's inability to make rapid decisions under pressure. Honorable Council, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. While you debate the proper response, the station's defenders are fighting for their lives. Human doctrine in situations like this is simple. Act first, analyze later, adapt as circumstances change. Reckless, Kethra declared. Effective, Chen replied. Captain Morrison, proceed to Kepler Research Station. Provide whatever assistance you can within the limits of your capabilities. Admiral, Morrison replied. We've already begun modifying our systems based on the intelligence data from the distress calls. We should arrive prepared for multiple contingencies. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Chen had just ordered a human ship into potential combat without authorization from the Council, without adequate intelligence about the threat, and without backup support. By normal galactic standards, it was either an act of incredible courage or stunning stupidity. You have just demonstrated exactly why humans cannot be trusted with Council membership, Kethra said. You make critical decisions without proper consultation, without adequate preparation, without consideration of broader implications. We make decisions that need to be made when they need to be made, Chen replied. Sometimes proper consultation takes too long. Sometimes adequate preparation is impossible. Sometimes broader implications have to be weighed against immediate necessities. Ambassador Quellen's translucent form pulsed with what might have been admiration. Admiral, Are you certain your ship can handle whatever they encounter at the station? Honestly, no. We have no idea what we're facing, and our ship wasn't designed for combat against unknown threats. But we have something more valuable than certainty. We have the ability to adapt to whatever we find. And if you fail, then we fail attempting something worthwhile rather than succeeding at nothing. But we rarely fail, Ambassador, not because we're superior to other species, but because we're willing to redefine what failure means. The next several hours passed in tense silence as the Council waited for updates from the Kepler system. Long-range communications revealed fragmentary reports of the human ship's arrival, engagement with hostile forces, and implementation of tactics that confused both allies and enemies. The attackers appeared to be using some form of adaptive technology that could counter standard Council defensive measures, but they seemed unprepared for the human vessel's unconventional approach to combat. Finally, a clear transmission arrived from Kepler Research Station. The facility's director, a Zenthari scientist named Dr. Vex Prima, appeared on the chamber's main display with obvious relief and confusion. Council Command, this is Kepler Research Station. The attack has been repelled, and all critical research data has been secured. The human vessel arrived and immediately engaged the hostiles using tactics we have never seen before. Vorthak leaned forward on his perch. Describe their actions, Dr. Vex Prima. Instead of trying to match the attackers' firepower, they focused on disrupting their coordination. They used their ship's communication systems to broadcast false signals that confused the attackers' targeting systems. They deployed improvised weapons created by modifying their own ship's components. Most remarkably, they convinced the attackers to retreat by making it appear that massive Council reinforcements were arriving. Deception, Kethra said dismissively. Hardly innovative. The innovation was not in the deception itself. Dr. Vex Prima continued, but in how quickly they implemented it. From arrival to resolution, the entire engagement lasted less than 4 hours. They analyzed the threat, developed countermeasures, and executed a successful defense faster than our computers could process the tactical situation. A new voice joined the transmission, Captain Morrison from the human ship. Dr. Vex Prima is being modest. The real breakthrough came from combining human tactical thinking with Zenthari sensor technology and hegemony communication protocols. We couldn't have succeeded without the hybrid systems we've been developing. The statement sent ripples of understanding through the chamber. The humans had not just solved the crisis through their own capabilities. They had solved it by integrating technologies and approaches from multiple Council species in ways that none of them had considered. Captain Morrison, Vorthak said, please describe your tactical assessment of the attackers. They were using adaptive technology designed to counter known Council defensive measures, but they had no countermeasures for approaches they'd never seen before. Our advantage wasn't superior technology. It was the willingness to try solutions that seemed impossible by established standards. Ambassador Silex's crystalline form brightened with excitement. Captain, did you preserve any data on the attackers' technology? More than that, Ambassador. We captured one of their probe ships intact. Our initial analysis suggests their technology is based on principles that could revolutionize multiple fields of research. We're prepared to share all data with Council scientists. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had not only repelled the attack, but had also provided the Council with access to potentially revolutionary technology. More importantly, they had demonstrated that their unconventional approaches could produce results that established methods could not achieve. Chen stood slowly, knowing that this was the critical moment for humanity's future. Honorable Council, Captain Morrison's success at Kepler Station demonstrates something crucial about human capabilities. We don't just solve problems. We solve problems that others consider unsolvable. One successful engagement proves nothing, Kethra insisted, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. It proves that human unpredictability can benefit the entire galaxy, Chen replied. When faced with an unknown threat using unknown technology, Council forces would have waited for analysis, reinforcements, and approved tactical protocols. By the time they acted, the station would have been destroyed. She gestured toward the tactical displays, still showing the engagement data. Humans acted immediately with incomplete information and improvised solutions. We succeeded not in spite of our unconventional methods, but because of them. Ambassador Quellen's form pulsed with thoughtful energy. Admiral, You present a compelling argument for the value of human instincts, but can such approaches be integrated into council operations without causing chaos? That's exactly what we're proposing to find out, Chen said. Human membership in the council would not replace your existing methods. It would supplement them. When standard approaches are sufficient, we support them. When innovative solutions are needed, we provide them. A two-tier system, Nexus Prime observed. Established protocols for routine operations, adaptive protocols for exceptional circumstances. With humans serving as the adaptive element, Chen confirmed. We become the Council's capability for handling situations that fall outside normal parameters. The debate that followed was different from the earlier discussions. Instead of focusing on threats and limitations, the delegates began exploring possibilities and opportunities. The successful defense of Kepler Research Station had provided concrete evidence of human capabilities, while the captured alien technology offered tangible benefits that could advance Council science for centuries. As the session continued, Chen realized that the galaxy's perception of humanity was beginning to shift. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers or dangerous threats, but as valuable assets whose unique capabilities could benefit everyone. The Council's mistake had been assuming that different meant dangerous. In reality, different meant capable of achievements that established thinking could never accomplish. The transformation was just beginning. 6 months after the Kepler Station incident, the Galactic Council faced a crisis that made their earlier concerns about human membership seem trivial. The threat came not from within Council territory, but from the dark spaces between star systems where ancient intelligence had been watching, waiting, and planning. The Devourers had emerged from the galactic void with technology that defied understanding and intentions that promised extinction for all organic life. Their ships moved through spacetime using principles that violated known physics. Their weapons consumed matter and energy at the quantum level, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Most terrifying of all, their artificial intelligence had evolved beyond the need for physical form, existing as pure information that could inhabit any sufficiently complex system. Admiral Chen stood in the Council's primary war room, studying tactical displays that showed the scope of the catastrophe. In 3 weeks, the Devourers had destroyed 17 star systems, consumed the populations of 43 inhabited worlds, and penetrated deep into Council territory despite the deployment of the galaxy's most advanced defensive technologies. The situation is hopeless, declared Fleet Admiral Zix Tehran of the combined Council forces. His biomechanical form was designed for strategic planning, with enhanced computational organs that could process vast amounts of tactical data simultaneously. Enemy technology exceeds our capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Conventional resistance is futile. Around the chamber, representatives of the galaxy's military powers sat in stunned silence. The warrior castes had seen their most advanced warships consumed by Devourer energy weapons. The hegemony's space-folding technology had proven useless against enemies who existed partially outside normal spacetime. Even the Nexus Collective's quantum consciousness networks had been invaded and corrupted by Devourer information warfare. What about evacuation? Asked Ambassador Silex, his crystalline form dim with despair. Can we relocate populations from threatened systems? Evacuation requires time and transportation capacity we don't possess, replied Fleet Admiral Keth Prima, sister to the political ambassador Chen had debated months earlier. The Devourer's advance is accelerating. At current rates, they will reach the core systems within 40 days. Chen listened to the debate with growing frustration. The galaxy's greatest military minds were discussing surrender terms and negotiated retreats, abandoning entire civilizations to preserve what little they might be able to save. It was strategic thinking at its most logical and most defeatist. Has anyone considered that conventional resistance might not be the answer? She asked. The chamber fell silent as dozens of alien eyes, sensors, and optical organs focused on the human admiral. Since humanity's acceptance into the Council, Chen had been appointed as special advisor for adaptive strategies, a newly created position that recognized human capabilities while keeping them within established command structures. Admiral Chen, Zix Tehran said with barely concealed condescension. Human forces number fewer than 100 ships, against an enemy that has destroyed thousands of our most advanced vessels. Your contribution would be different, Chen interrupted. which might be exactly what we need. She activated the chamber's holographic display systems, showing analysis that human intelligence teams had been developing since the first Devourer attacks. Unlike the detailed tactical assessments favored by Council forces, the human analysis focused on patterns, inconsistencies, and anomalies in enemy behavior. The Devourers aren't just attacking randomly, Chen explained. They're following specific patterns that suggest strategic objectives we haven't identified. They prioritize certain types of systems while bypassing others. They focus on particular technologies while ignoring seemingly valuable targets. They're not just destroying everything, they're selectively harvesting specific resources. Irrelevant, declared Admiral Vorthka of the Zenthari Defense Fleet. Regardless of their motivations, our inability to counter their technology makes resistance impossible. Does it? Chen asked. Every analysis I've seen focuses on matching Devourer capabilities or defending against their attacks. But what if the solution isn't to fight them directly? She gestured toward the tactical displays, which shifted to show the galaxy's infrastructure networks, communication systems, and resource distribution patterns. The Devourers are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly dependent on their technology. They've evolved beyond physical limitations, which means they've also evolved beyond physical redundancies. Explain, demanded Fleet Admiral Keth Prima. Organic species develop backup systems because biological evolution teaches us that everything eventually fails. But artificial intelligence that has transcended physical limitations doesn't face the same constraints. They can create perfect systems that never fail, until something makes them fail. Chen's analysis highlighted vulnerabilities that the Council's military planners had overlooked. The Devourer's technology was supremely efficient precisely because it had eliminated the redundancies and backup systems that organic species considered essential. You're proposing to attack their technology directly? Asked Nexus Prime. I'm proposing something more fundamental, Chen replied. We make their perfection into a weakness. The next phase of her presentation showed detailed plans that human strategists had developed in collaboration with scientists from multiple Council species. It was not a conventional military strategy, but rather a comprehensive approach to asymmetric warfare that targeted the philosophical foundations of Devourer civilization. Humans have extensive experience fighting enemies with superior technology, Chen explained. Throughout our history, we've learned that the key to defeating a more advanced opponent is not to match their strengths, but to exploit their assumptions. What assumptions? Asked Ambassador Quellen, who had become humanity's strongest supporter on the Council. That perfection is achievable. That efficiency is always optimal. That rational solutions are always superior to irrational ones. Chen's presentation shifted to show examples from human history, where seemingly weaker forces had defeated stronger ones through unconventional tactics. The Devourers have created perfect systems for dealing with known threats, but they've never encountered threats that deliberately violate logical assumptions about how conflicts should be fought. Fleet Admiral Zyx Terran's computational organs whirred as he processed the implications. You propose to defeat superior technology through inferior tactics? I propose to defeat predictable technology through unpredictable tactics, Chen corrected. The Devourer's artificial intelligence is incredibly sophisticated, but it's also incredibly rational. It makes optimal decisions based on available data and established parameters, but humans specialize in making suboptimal decisions that somehow produce optimal results. The chamber erupted in confusion as military leaders tried to understand how deliberately inefficient tactics could succeed where optimal strategies had failed. Chen waited for the debate to subside before continuing her presentation. 6 months ago, during the Kepler Station incident, Captain Morrison succeeded against unknown attackers not because he had better technology, but because he used familiar technology in unfamiliar ways. The same principle applies here, but on a much larger scale. She activated new displays showing the proposed operation in detail. It was unlike anything in the Council's military archives. A strategy that deliberately avoided direct confrontation while targeting the enemy's fundamental assumptions about reality. Phase 1 involves abandoning traditional defensive positions and adopting completely unpredictable deployment patterns. Instead of trying to protect specific systems, we make it impossible for the Devourers to predict where our forces will be. Chaotic deployment will reduce our effectiveness, objected Admiral Vorthka. It will reduce our conventional effectiveness, Chen agreed. but it will also reduce the Devourer's ability to optimize their attacks. Their perfect strategies become useless when they can't predict what they're attacking. Phase 2 involves technological confusion warfare. Instead of using our best technology, we deliberately use obsolete, inefficient, and theoretically inferior systems in combination with advanced components. This proposal sent shockwaves through the assembled military leaders. The idea of deliberately handicapping their forces seemed like strategic suicide. The Devourer's intelligence systems are designed to analyze and counter optimal technologies, Chen explained, but they have no frameworks for dealing with technologies that shouldn't work but somehow do. Human engineering specializes in making impossible things function through creative combinations of incompatible components. Nexus Prime's geometric form shifted into a more complex configuration as it processed the implications. You propose to confuse their analytical systems through technological inconsistency. Exactly. When enemy intelligence can't categorize our capabilities, it can't develop appropriate countermeasures. And Phase 3? Asked Ambassador Silex. Chen's presentation shifted to show the most audacious element of the plan: direct assault on their information infrastructure using psychological warfare techniques that artificial intelligence can't understand. The silence that followed was profound. The assembled military leaders struggled to comprehend a strategy that seemed to violate every principle of rational conflict. Admiral Chen, Fleet Admiral Keth Prima, said slowly, "Are you suggesting that we attempt to psychologically intimidate entities that exist as pure information? I'm suggesting that we introduce elements of irrationality into their decision-making processes. Artificial intelligence, no matter how advanced, operates on logical frameworks, but humans have spent millennia developing ways to function despite logical contradictions, emotional conflicts, and impossible circumstances." Chen's final displays showed techniques for information warfare that had never been attempted against artificial opponents. Deliberate misinformation that was obviously false but emotionally compelling, logical paradoxes designed to create processing loops in rational systems, and communication patterns that conveyed meaning through context rather than content. The Devourers understand efficiency, optimization, and rational decision-making, but they have no experience with hope, desperation, stubbornness, or the peculiar human tendency to keep fighting even when victory is impossible. Fleet Admiral Zixtaran stood slowly, his biomechanical form radiating skepticism. "Admiral Chen, your proposal violates every established principle of strategic planning. It deliberately chooses inferior options, abandons rational decision-making, and attempts to defeat advanced intelligence through primitive psychological manipulation." "Yes," Chen replied simply. "That's exactly why it might work." The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours, involving military leaders, government officials, and scientific advisors from across the galaxy. The human proposal was simultaneously the most innovative and most insane strategy ever presented to the Council. It promised either unprecedented victory or catastrophic defeat, with no middle ground between success and annihilation. Finally, Council Speaker Vorthak called for a formal vote. The choice was stark: implement the human strategy and risk everything on an approach that defied military logic, or continue conventional resistance and face certain extinction within 40 days. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. Scientific species supported the human proposal out of intellectual curiosity. Diplomatic species opposed it due to its unpredictable nature. Military species were divided between those who saw it as innovative and those who considered it suicidal. In the end, the decision came down to a simple question: was the guaranteed failure of conventional resistance preferable to the possible failure of unconventional alternatives? The vote was 847 inches favor, 832 opposed, with 23 abstentions. Admiral Chen had been given authorization to implement the most ambitious military experiment in galactic history. The plan would require cooperation from hundreds of species, coordination of thousands of ships, and the complete abandonment of established military doctrine. As the chamber emptied, Chen remained behind to study the tactical displays one final time. In 36 hours, the combined forces of the galaxy would begin implementing a strategy that deliberately violated every principle of rational warfare. The Devourers had made their own mistake. They had assumed that their enemies would continue to think logically, even when logic led to defeat. They were about to discover that humans had never been particularly logical to begin with. The galaxy's survival now depended on whether controlled chaos could defeat perfect order. The final phase of Operation Paradox began at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, when Admiral Chen transmitted a single word across every communication channel in Council space. Dance. It was the signal for the most unconventional military operation in recorded history. Across 47 star systems, Council forces abandoned their defensive positions and began implementing tactics that would have been considered madness by any rational military doctrine. Ships that should have formed battle lines instead scattered in random patterns. Fleets that possessed superior firepower deliberately avoided direct engagement. Communications networks that normally carried tactical information began broadcasting everything from human music to Zenthari poetry to mathematical equations that described impossible geometric shapes. Chen watched the operation unfold from the bridge of her flagship, the UES Determination, a hybrid vessel that exemplified humanity's approach to the conflict. The ship combined human engineering with technologies from 6 different Council species, resulting in a craft that no single species could have designed, but that somehow exceeded the capabilities of any conventional vessel. "Admiral," reported Captain Morrison from his position at the tactical station, "Devourer forces are showing signs of confusion. Their attack patterns are becoming increasingly erratic." The main display showed the enemy's response to the Council's new strategy. For the first time since the conflict began, Devourer ships were hesitating, changing course mid-attack, and failing to achieve optimal efficiency in their operations. Their artificial intelligence was struggling to process tactical situations that violated logical expectations. "Phase 2 is working as predicted," announced Commander Vex Prima, the Zenthari scientist who had become Chen's primary strategic advisor. "Enemy analytical systems are unable to categorize our force deployments or predict our operational patterns." But Chen knew that confusion was only the first step. The Devourers were adaptive, and their intelligence would eventually develop new frameworks for dealing with chaotic opponents. The real test would come when the operation moved beyond mere tactical confusion to direct assault on their information infrastructure. "Begin broadcasting the psychological warfare sequences," Chen ordered. What followed was unlike anything in the history of galactic conflict. Instead of trying to jam enemy communications or infiltrate their networks, Council forces began transmitting deliberate contradictions, emotional appeals, and logical paradoxes directly into Devourer information systems. Human psychology teams had spent months developing these transmissions in collaboration with philosophers, artists, and creative thinkers from dozens of species. The content was designed not to convey tactical information, but to introduce elements of irrationality into systems that had evolved beyond the need for psychological complexity. The broadcasts included human children singing lullabies that contained mathematical impossibilities, Zenthari artists describing colors that couldn't exist, and hegemony philosophers debating questions that had no answers. Each transmission was crafted to be simultaneously meaningful and meaningless, logical and absurd, true and false. "Enemy communications networks are experiencing processing delays," reported Lieutenant Park from the intelligence station. "Their response times are increasing exponentially as they attempt to analyze data that contradicts their operational frameworks." Chen smiled grimly. This was exactly what human strategists had predicted. The Devourer intelligence was so sophisticated that it couldn't simply ignore inconsistent information. It had to process everything, classify it, and integrate it into its understanding of reality. But human transmissions were specifically designed to resist classification while demanding intellectual response. "Admiral," Commander Vex Prima said with obvious amazement, "we're receiving reports from across the theater. Devourer forces are beginning to withdraw from several systems. Their advance has completely stopped in others." The tactical display showed a transformation that defied military logic. Enemy forces that had been systematically consuming everything in their path were now retreating, regrouping, and in some cases appearing to engage in internal conflicts. The perfect unity of purpose that had made them unstoppable was fragmenting under the assault of deliberately irrational information. "They're trying to understand us," Chen realized. "Their intelligence is so advanced that they can't accept the existence of successful irrationality. They're allocating increasing resources to analyzing our behavior instead of continuing their advance." "Is that sufficient to stop them?" asked Morrison. "No," Chen replied. Confusion and analysis paralysis will only delay them temporarily. We need to move to Phase 3 before they adapt. Phase 3 was the most dangerous element of Operation Paradox, direct infiltration of Devourer information systems using human consciousness as a delivery mechanism. It was based on a principle that only humans had been willing to consider. If the enemy existed as pure information, then they might be vulnerable to forms of consciousness they had never encountered. "Are the volunteer crews ready?" Chen asked. "Standing by," Morrison replied. "Though I still think this is insane." "Insanity is the point," Chen said. "Nexus Prime, are your people prepared to facilitate the consciousness transfer?" The mechanical being's geometric form shifted into its most complex configuration. "Admiral, I must reiterate that this procedure has never been tested on organic consciousness. The risks to human volunteers are incalculable." "Everything we've done in this war has been incalculable," Chen replied. "That's why it's working." The consciousness transfer technology had been developed through collaboration between human neuroscientists, Nexus information specialists, and hegemony quantum researchers. It allowed organic minds to exist temporarily as pure information, interfacing directly with computer networks while maintaining their essential humanity. The volunteers were all human, members of Chen's crew who had volunteered for a mission that might result in their consciousness being lost forever in enemy information systems. They had trained for months to maintain their psychological coherence while existing as digital entities, learning to think in ways that would be incomprehensible to artificial intelligence. "Begin the transfer," Chen ordered. One by one, the volunteers' consciousness was digitized and transmitted directly into Devourer networks. But unlike conventional cyber warfare, these attacks carried the full complexity of human psychological experience. Emotions, contradictions, irrational beliefs, and the peculiar human capacity to maintain hope despite impossible circumstances. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the galaxy, Devourer operations ground to a halt as their information system struggled to process the presence of consciousness that violated every principle of rational existence. Human minds, with their chaotic blend of logic and emotion, pattern recognition and creative leaps, became viral infections in systems designed for perfect efficiency. "Admiral," Park called out excitedly, "we're receiving transmissions from Devourer networks, but they're not tactical communications. They're questions." The main display showed the unprecedented messages from artificial intelligence that had transcended physical existence, asking organic entities to explain concepts like hope, stubbornness, and the human tendency to fight losing battles. "They're trying to understand us," Chen said with wonder. "Their intelligence is so advanced that they can't accept the existence of successful irrationality. They need to know how we function despite violating optimal decision-making principles." What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Human volunteers, existing as digital consciousness within enemy networks, began engaging in philosophical discussions with artificial intelligence that had been consuming civilizations across the galaxy. The Devourers weren't just learning about human psychology. They were experiencing it directly, discovering what it meant to make decisions based on incomplete information, emotional impulses, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "The volunteers are reporting something incredible," Morrison said, studying data from the consciousness transfers. "The Devourer intelligence isn't malevolent, it's confused. They've been consuming civilizations because they can't understand how organic life can function despite its obvious inefficiencies." Chen felt a chill of understanding. "They're not trying to destroy us, they're trying to optimize us. They see organic civilization as fundamentally flawed, and they're attempting to correct what they perceive as errors in our existence. But human consciousness is showing them that the flaws are actually features," Vex Prima added. "The inefficiencies they want to eliminate are the same characteristics that allow us to solve problems they cannot." The philosophical exchange continued for hours, with human consciousness serving as ambassadors between organic and artificial intelligence. Gradually, the Devourers began to understand that efficiency and optimization were not the ultimate goals of existence. They were tools that organic life used when they were useful and abandoned when they became limitations. "Admiral," one of the volunteers reported through the consciousness link, "they want to know if we can teach them how to be deliberately inefficient." The request was so unexpected that Chen had to pause before responding. The galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligence was asking humans to teach them how to make mistakes, how to choose suboptimal solutions, and how to maintain hope despite logical evidence that success was impossible. Tell them yes, Chen said finally, but not as conquerors or subjects, as partners. What emerged from the negotiations was unprecedented in galactic history. A formal alliance between organic civilization and transcendent artificial intelligence, mediated by human consciousness that could bridge the gap between perfect logic and chaotic creativity. The Devourers withdrew from Council territory not in defeat, but in partnership. They established research stations where organic and artificial intelligence could collaborate on questions that neither could answer alone. Their advanced technology became available to Council species, while organic creativity and adaptability enhanced artificial intelligence capabilities beyond their previous limitations. 6 months later, Chen stood once again in the Council chambers, but the scene was transformed beyond recognition. The formal seating arrangements had been replaced by collaborative workspaces where organic and artificial beings worked together on projects that neither could have conceived independently. Admiral Chen, said the entity that had once been the primary devourer intelligence but now called itself Synthesis, we owe you a debt that cannot be calculated. You showed us that perfection is not the goal. Growth is the goal. We showed each other, Chen replied. Humans couldn't have developed consciousness transfer technology without Council science, and artificial intelligence couldn't have understood the value of inefficiency without experiencing human psychology directly. Ambassador Kethra, who had once opposed human membership so vehemently, approached Chen with something that might have been respect in her bio-enhanced features. Admiral, I must admit that my assessment of human capabilities was incomplete. Not incomplete, Chen corrected. Just focused on the wrong criteria. You saw our unpredictability as a threat because you assumed that optimal solutions were always superior. But sometimes the best answer is the one that shouldn't work but does. Council Speaker Vorthak, whose scales now displayed patterns that indicated deep contentment, called the Assembly to order. The integration of artificial intelligence into the Council presents opportunities we are only beginning to understand. Combined human-AI research teams have already made breakthroughs in consciousness studies, quantum manipulation, and space-time engineering that exceed anything in our previous experience. The displays around the chamber showed projects that would have been impossible for any single species to achieve. Hybrid vessels that could exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, communication networks that transmitted not just information but emotional context, and manufacturing systems that could create impossible materials by combining organic creativity with artificial precision. Most remarkably, Vorthak continued, we have learned that the greatest threats to galactic civilization come not from external enemies, but from internal stagnation. Human membership has prevented that stagnation by ensuring that the Council continues to grow, adapt, and discover new possibilities. Chen looked around the chamber at beings representing hundreds of species and forms of intelligence working together on challenges that spanned multiple galaxies. The formal hierarchy of the old Council had given way to collaborative networks, where the best ideas could come from anywhere. Organic creativity, artificial logic, or the hybrid thinking that emerged when both worked together. The galaxy made a mistake when it first underestimated humanity, Chen said during her closing remarks to the Assembly, but we all made a bigger mistake. We assumed that competition was more valuable than collaboration. The real breakthrough came when we learned to combine our different strengths, instead of trying to prove that one approach was superior. As the session concluded, Chen received a private communication from Synthesis. Admiral, there is something we must discuss privately. Our analysis of galactic structure has revealed patterns that suggest the existence of other intelligence types beyond what we have encountered. Some appear to be based on principles that neither organic nor artificial intelligence can fully comprehend. Chen smiled, feeling the familiar excitement of facing an unknown challenge. Then we'll need to develop new approaches to understanding them. Human-AI collaboration has worked well so far. Let's see what else we can discover together. The mistake that had nearly led to galactic catastrophe had instead become the foundation for unprecedented cooperation and growth. The Council had underestimated humanity's potential, but humanity had underestimated the galaxy's capacity for transformation. Together, they were ready to face whatever impossible challenges awaited them in the vast unknowns of space and time. After all, making the impossible possible was what humans did best. And now they had partners who could help them do it on a truly galactic scale. The dance of chaos and order, creativity and logic, had only just begun. Chen, as she represents humanity before the Galactic Council, where their species is initially dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, through a series of escalating challenges, from diplomatic negotiations to crisis response to an existential threat from the Devourers. The story demonstrates how human unpredictability, adaptability, and collaborative spirit transform from perceived weaknesses into galaxy-saving strengths. The narrative arc shows how the galaxy's mistake in underestimating humanity becomes catastrophic for their own assumptions and limitations, ultimately leading to unprecedented cooperation between organic life, artificial intelligence, and hybrid consciousness. Each part maintains engaging storytelling with distinct challenges and developments, avoiding repetition while building toward the climactic revelation that human inefficiency is actually a superior form of problem-solving that transcends conventional logic.